This video is sponsored by Stonesy's Gun Range. If you want to shoot a blaze and you want to shoot it fast, just come on to Stonesy's Gun Range class. We'll teach you how to shoot a blaze, but you don't get to keep the blaze rod. Hello everyone, my name's Stonesy Boy and welcome back to Reading with Stonesy. Today we are reading pages 181 to 200. Last time our poor little boy has, had a nightmare. So, without further ado, let's begin. Toby's eyes widened. Did his own shadow just delay follow him? He leaned quickly to the left, but this time the shadow moved quickly. He shook his head. Weird. He probably wasn't fully awake yet. Toby yawned, scratched his chest, and stretched out his arms over his head. The shadow followed along. Then he winced. His body was sore. Guilt from last night came crashing back. Dang, why was he having to mess up the game like that? What was Dan, his boss, going to say? Was he going to get caught? Was he put his arms down? The shadow arms were still up. Toby sucked in a breath and jumped into his bed. Looking at the wall behind his bed, he saw nothing. No shadow. He whipped his head toward the mirror and saw a shadow behind him. A chill radiated down his spine. He stepped closer to the large mirror in the dresser, watching the shadow follow closely behind. The closer he got, the dark shadow followed. He steered into the mouth, and his mouth went dry. The shadow had rabbit ears. Toby spun around as if he could somehow catch the shadow, but every time he turned, there was nothing behind him, as if it would suddenly duck and hide somewhere. In this room, Toby went to his bed and peered underneath, just a bunch of dust and junk. He went to the closet and saw more junk, but even that didn't make sense. He glanced back in the mirror, and the shadow was still behind him. The only rabbit that I could think of was the Bonnie the rabbit from the game Hide and Seek. Toby froze for a moment, trying to comprehend what was actually happening. A rabbit shadow from a game attached to his back? He frowned. Wait, this couldn't be real. Suddenly, relief scraped through him. He slapped his hand on his forehead and barked out a laugh. I'm still dreaming, duh. There's no way this could have to be a shadow of the shape of a rabbit. This is some nightmare he was having because he was afraid he got caught playing the done game. Everything was fine, he assured himself. He yawned again and he decided to go back to bed. When he could really wake up again, to only a shadow would be his own. He climbed back into bed and got underneath the covers. He looked once more into the mirror, seeing the shadow hovering behind him. Toby waved, and the shadow waved with him. He lay down and closed his eyes, drifting off to sleep. Toby blinked away. His eyes were blurry. He rubbed his eyes and yawned, stretching out his sore body. Even though he slept in, he felt exhausted. He sat up in bed, glancing into the dresser mirror. The shadow was still there. Fear punched his chest, and he pushed back against the wall, kicking the covers off of him. He sprang out of bed, hunched down, and staring at the mirror. The shadow lurked just at his back. Toby reached behind him as if he could feel the shadow, but he only grabbed air. He swallowed hard and he stood straight, and the shadow did the same. He turned aside to see if he could see the shadow closely, but for some reason the shadow stayed just behind him. Who are you? He asked the shadow. What do you want? Shadow didn't speak. Get away from me. Nothing happened. I said go away. Nothing. Toby gritted his teeth, and he paced back and forth, rubbing his hand through the air. Okay, there was a shadow following him with his own shadow. How could this be happening? It was so freaking weird. He stopped again, leaning into the dresser with his hands, and peered into the mirror. Every time he saw the darkness behind him, a chill ran down his entire body, making him shiver. Did his back feel heavier than usual? Toby was pretty sure it was because it was the thing that was attached to him. What should he do? Well, he knew what he should do. He needed to get it off him. But how could he make it go away? I can do this, he murmured. I can get it off of me. There has to be a way. Think. He bit his bottom lip, glanced at the wall in the moment reflection in the mirror. Staring at the moment, he pushed away to the dresser and rubbed his chin and studied the wall. Abruptly, he turned his back to the wall and sucked in a breath, then blew it out. Then he sucked in another breath and exhaled again. Squeezed his eyes shut, he ran backward and slammed against the bare wall. He knocked off the wind into his mouth. His entire body vibrated. He lunged forward and then slammed back hard against the wall again and again. Pain radiated down his spine and fell to the floor, wincing. A sheen of sweat sprang across his forehead and he crawled into the dresser, his back throbbing. He reached up and pulled himself to his feet, staring into the mirror. His shadow still lurked behind him. He threw himself helplessly onto the bed and screamed into his pillow. Nervous and bruised, Toby dressed, avoiding the mirror. He left his room and went to the kitchen. The feeling that someone was on his back wouldn't go away. It was like he was being watched. He felt stalked, trapped. There was a pile of dishes in the sink and the scent of burnt bacon and eggs. Whose turn was it to do dishes? Probably his, but he didn't care. Toby turned and stepped into the front room. His dad was in shorts and a t-shirt, kicked back in the recliner, blurry-eyed and drinking coffee. Toby swallowed hard and cracked his knuckles. Hey, Dad. Dad grunted and looked over Toby. Morning, Tobes. Morning, Toby's hands were shaking, his fists were in tight grip. Dad, do you see anything different about me? His dad squinted at him, looking at him up and down. You look the same to me. Did you do something different? He scratched his scruff and his chin and studied him. He's finally growing some hair above your lip? Toby shook his head right away. No, just asking if you could see anything out of the ordinary, something that was not supposed to be there. Just then Connor strolled in. Don't worry, Tobe, you still get the same little loser, nothing's changed. Shut up, Connor, he said. But without the usual heat, Connor reached out and rubbed Toby's head. So Toby shoved him away. Neither of you. See my shadow? Toby asked him. Really? Connor made a face. What are you talking about, idiot? He stretched out his arm. A shadow, idiot. You see it or what? Can you answer a simple question? Connor looked around Toby, shaking his head, and walked through the kitchen. You got problems, Tobes. Toby rounded to his dad, who just ignored him and continued to watch sports. How could they not see there was weird darkness following him around? Was he still dreaming? No, he was definitely wide awake. His back was still hurting from slamming against the wall. He was the only one that could see it, but that make him crazy? Had Connor finally driven him nuts? He went to his dad, leaned forward to him. Dad, feel my head. Dad felt a coffee and cigarettes. His eyes were a little bloodshot. Dad sighed. Toes, what's the matter with you? He put his hand on his forehead. No, you're good, son. You don't get any ideas about skipping school, alright? When I started to get a bunch of calls and texts from school while I'm trying to sleep before my shift. Toby straightened. I'm not. The phone rang. Connor answered. Yeah? Yep. Hold on. Hey, idiot. It's for you. Work. Toby's gut flipped. Oh, no, no, no. He walked over to Connor, snickered at him. And Toby were not the phone away from him. Yeah, hello? Toby, it's Dan. Can you come to work? I need to talk to you about something. Very important. Toby scratched his head. Yeah, sure. Alright, see you soon. Okay. Toby hung up. So Connor winced his eyes. Ooh, Tobes is in trouble. What'd you do now? Toby schooled his expression in instance, which was kind of hard. Nothing? Connor shook his head. Dan never calls employees unless they mess up royally. What'd you do? Forget to lock up something? Or you broke something? Or didn't tell him? Toby narrowed his eyes at his brother. Did he know something? I didn't mess it up. He probably called me in because he told me that was a fantastic job I've been doing. So much better than you ever did. Yeah, right. I do everything better than you. Even that stupid job. Holy cow, Dad would yell from the other room. Bases loaded, babies. Boys, get in there. This babe's getting good. Connor lost interest in Toby and strode in the front room, joining Dad. What'd I tell you? They got the game easy. I always pick the winning team, right, Dad? Dad laughed. You do, son, you do. Toby rolled his eyes and walked back to the room. He realized he wasn't hungry at all. He really couldn't argue with his brother doing him a better job at Freddy's at the moment. He messed up royally by breaking hide and seek. He didn't know what had been happening when he walked to Dan. He looked into the mirror and the shadow lurked behind him with a dark ghost that wouldn't leave him alone. He shuddered. He looked at his hands, still shaking. This whole thing was freaking him out. Toby slapped the beanie in his head and took a breath in an attempt to calm his nerves. He had to face Dan about hide and seek. Then he figured out what to do about the shadow. Dad lifted his beefy arm and encompassed the entire disaster area of hide and seek. Can you believe it? It just opened this game and now it's destroyed. Dan was built like a bull, of all big-chested and meaty arms, but with short, skinny legs. He was an okay boss. It was always cool to Toby. It was like Toby felt pretty bad for messing up his game. Toby stared at the chaos of the room in wide eyes. The game looked even worse than he remembered. The screen was dead now. Dan must have shut it down. Nearly all the cutouts were torn from the wall. Only pegs were still sticking out of the place. Most of the cutouts were broken. Some split totally in half. There were a few dents in the walls. I can't believe it, Toby said, cracking his knuckles. He couldn't believe he'd done all this damage by himself. Dan turned to Toby, eyeing him with intensity. Do you have any idea who did this? Toby shook his head and guilt weighed heavy on his conscience. No, Dan, I don't know who could have done this. You didn't see anyone suspicious messing around last night? You checked the bathroom stalls, right? The play area? None of them were hiding there after closing? Yeah, I did a routine check like you always tell me. No, I didn't see anyone suspicious. Dan ran his hand down the thick beards. Really ticks me off, you know? I put good money into the place for people to enjoy, and this is how I'm repaid? Ticks me off. Yeah, I bet. When I was a kid, they didn't have places like these. Kids played outdoors and just went and had pizza. But I like the idea of families coming together to eat and play together. Have a party. This place wasn't much, but it's a dream of mine. So it really upsets me when something like this happens, Dan sighed. Well, I gotta get a technician in here and we'll see what we can do. Thanks for coming in, Toby. Toby nodded. Let me help you clean up. Dan placed his hands on his hips. Sure, but I gotta keep all the parts for insurance. The police already took pictures. Toby felt Clinton's got the police. Yeah, I had a report to break-in vandalism. They may need to ask you some questions. They're just talking to everyone who worked last night. Toby swallowed hard and nodded. Sure, no problem. If you could pick up some big pieces and set them in a pile and sweep up all the small stuff, it would be helpful. Sure. Thanks, Toby. You're a good kid. Dan stomped out of the game room, muttering something under his breath. Toby's shoulders slumped when he started to clean up the floor. He piled big cutouts going against one wall. When he looked at the cutout of the bushes, he saw the beanie from last night. His heart skipped a beat as he looked behind him to see if anyone had come into the room. He suddenly swiped it up and picked it in his back pocket. Suddenly, his head jerked to the railing. Wooden blocks he made were all jammed inside. He picked up a long piece of broken wood and started to pry them out of the rail. One by one, heart pounding, he hurriedly picked up the 3 pieces of the floor and stashed them in the sweatshirt. Then, taking a breath, he continued to clean up his mess. Toby felt awful the rest of the weekend. He mostly stayed in his room, but he had an old sheet over his mirror. Even though he knew Shadow was still there, he didn't want to have to look at it. Every time he did, his pulse fluttered. Then he started to shake because it was supposed to be there. It was like this scary, dark, hidden secret. He ate almost nothing on Sunday and barely slept. He didn't talk to his dad or brother. Dad knocked on his door to check on him, and he told him he was just tired. He heard them yelling in some game on the television. Dad, Connor, and Toby were pretty close. But Dad and Connor had an obsession with sports that he'd always shared. Dad wasn't either working a lot or sleeping, but when he wasn't, he was hanging out with Connor, watching sports and having a good old time. Since Toby wasn't too into sports, that was what left for Dad and Toby time. Toby guessed they'd in closer to Mom, but he wasn't sure since he left one day and Toby was about 5 and Connor 7, and had a vague memory of Dad bringing them home in Connor's Little League practice, and Mom had just been gone. Dad had called for her, and then Connor ran around the house looking for her. Dad had found a letter on the kitchen table, which Connor asked what it said, and wanted to know where Mom was, but Dad would read the letter, then crumpled it in his hand and walked away. That night was first of hundreds of frozen dinners not together. No explanation to Toby or Connor was given about Mom, so they just continued on with life as if Mom had never been around. Maybe that was when Connor really started attempting to be the best at everything. Toby wasn't sure. His brother could have been born with a screw loose. Toby skipped school on Monday, but he did decide to go to a shift at Freddy's that afternoon. He didn't know if he could pull the shift off. His energy was spent. His back felt tight and heavy. All he wanted to do was lie down and go to sleep. He walked into Freddy's, and Reggie met him with the arcade. Since he had a slice of pizza in his hand. Dude, you look gnarly. He chomped on his pizza. Toby was shrugged and walked past him. Whoa, what's with the shadow? Looks intense. Toby's eyes widened as he whirled. He rushed to Reggie and grabbed the front of his shirt in both hands. You can see it? Take it easy. Yeah, your shadow's way dark, dude. He bit into a slice and chewed in front of Toby's face. I can't get rid of it. It's freaking me out. Reggie left his eyebrows. I bet. How'd you get into it anyway? Toby let him and jerked the shoulder. I don't know. It just happened. A freak thing. I get it, man. It's personal. Reggie smoothed his shirt in the other hand. Really sucks. You gotta deal with it. Yeah, but you're the only one who said they could see it. Reggie nodded, and his red curls moved with motion. I totally see it. And do you see the ears? Reggie frowned. Huh? Toby shook his head. Never mind. How can you even see it? Reggie shrugged. People say I see things differently. Toby stared at him, even didn't elaborate. Whatever. I think it's... Reggie shook over another bite of pizza. What? I think it's from the game. I cheated. Oh yeah? Which game? Toby wasn't sure he truly trusted him. It was the regular Freddy's, and he could tell Dan whatever he told him. Doesn't matter. I need to get rid of it. I can't keep walking around with this thing on my back. It's weird. Well, if I were you, I'd try anything to get rid of that thing off me like yesterday, Reggie shuddered. Looks totally creepy, dude. Just seeing Reggie's reaction made him shudder in return. Like, try what? I don't know what to make it go away. What do you think I could do? Dude, you're a gamer. Use your imagination. I've watched you for weeks attempt to beat your brother's score in nearly every game in this arcade. Takes fire, you know? That's what fire now. Toby stiffened, cracked his knuckles. I got fire. Reggie nodded. Then go to it, bro. That night, Toby thought about what Reggie said, and he felt inspired. He wasn't defeated yet. How could you beat the shadow and get it off him? Who could freaking win this game? He made a list. Ideas to remove shadow. Slam it off. Didn't work. Scrub it off. Drown it off. Burn it off. Forget that. Cut it off. Maybe. Toby went into the garage. He searched around the clutter for the car wash scrubber on a stick. No one had washed their cars in forever, but Toby knew the scrubber was still around here somewhere. It was a thick Brussels that might scrub the shadow off his back. It could totally work. Maybe. He was pretty much willing to try anything to get this thing off him. He kicked the boxes, making a path around the garage, shoved the lawnmower, and kicked the deflated football. Holy heck, he jumped to the little mouse skidder across the floor. He needed to remember to tell his dad to buy some mouse traps. When he finally found a scrubber stuck in the corner of the old wash bucket, he grabbed the scrubber and tried to reach it over his back. Then the stick was too long. He looked around and found a rusted saw in his dad's toolbox. He leaned the stick off the washer in his left hand and started sawing away at the stick, and might the blade be as dull and took away a few minutes. But it was spark and the stick finally broke off, dropping to the floor. Toby lifted the scrubber in his hand and felt the bristles with his fingers. Yeah, nice and thick. You'll do. He tipped the brush into his back and gave it a rub. It would definitely work. Determined, he took off his shirt and laid it to the dryer. He took a breath, grabbed the stick in both hands, and started scrubbing his back. Hard. Ow, ow, ow. He scrubbed, wincing. His bristles bit into his skin, scraping, scratching. You see how you like that, he muttered. He scrubbed and scrubbed at his back, feeling the skin peel away with the rawness. Jeez, this hurts. He scrubbed all till he felt like his back was burning, and he couldn't take it anymore. Trembling, he dropped to the scrubber and fell to his knees, sucking air through his teeth. His vision dimmed. He blinked. Please let this work, please, he whispered. Exhausted in the pain, he grabbed his shirt and carefully slid over his hand. Then, he got to his feet and stumbled back into the house in his room. Toby leaned against the dresser and slowly pulled the sheet cover into the mirror. He looked awful. His eyes were wild. His brown hair was stuck in his forehead in sweat. His face was pale, and his skin looked dry. He lifted his gaze to look behind him. The shadow gloomed in his back, and now seemed to be bigger and even darker. It moved as Toby's shoulders heaved. No, he said. It hadn't worked. He may have not gotten the shadow off his back, but he apparently ticked it off. He could feel its anger, its darkness, its more intensely. Feeling his emotions was like being squeezed into a small box, and the sides were closing in, suffocating him. Toby found his fist in the dresser. I hate you, he said. I hate you. Then he felt himself falling, and everything went black. Toby jerked himself awake and hit his knee on something loud. Ow! Olivia's saliva drooled from his mouth, and he wiped it away from the back of his hand. He heard knocking. He lifted his head and looked around. Clothes were littered around him. He was on the floor of his bedroom, his foot of his bed. He hit his knee on the dresser. He slept on the floor all night? More knocking on the door. Toby, get up. Dad said you had to go to school today. Connor bellowed through the door. All right, I'm up, he yelled. Settled his back against the carpet. He heard his brother walk away. Toby slowly sat up, wincing. His head felt like it had been falling to fall off. His back burned as if it was on fire. He pushed himself into his feet, and the room spun. Oh, dang. He grabbed his dresser and kept from falling again. He waited for the room to stop spinning. Even though he wasn't hungry, he had to eat something to keep up his energy. He didn't care to look in the mirror. He knew the shadow was still there. He could feel its weight. He could sense its darkness looming over him like a threat. Toby managed to shower first, but without falling over. But the spray hurt too badly, so he didn't want to let the water run down his back. He brushed his teeth, ignoring the shadow as it followed along the bathroom mirror. He dressed and walked into the kitchen. His brother sat on the table eating cereal, waffles, and 2 bananas. Connor stopped in mid-chew and he spotted Toby. "You're really sick?" Toby didn't care to answer. "You look bad. What's the matter with you?" Toby just took a bowl and got a cereal and milk and got the bowl of food. "Why aren't you talking, Tobes?" He shrugged. "Maybe you should stay home another day." Toby looked at his brother in surprise. Where was all the stupid remarks, all the put-downs? "I'm going." When Toby finally answered, Connor seemed satisfied. "All right, but if you got the flu, keep your distance." He wolfed down his cereal, waffles, and both bananas. He threw his dishes to the sink and gave a gnarly burp and said, "Later." Then he walked out of the kitchen. A moment later, the front door slammed shut. Toby ate a few spoonfuls of cereal, but after a few minutes, he felt something come right back up. He ran to the garbage and puked. His body shuddered in spasms. He managed to straighten with his hands to his stomach, but he didn't know better. The shadow seemed to be sticking out the life out of him. The idea of something overpowering him annoyed the heck out of him. He clenched his fist. "You're not going to win." Toby felt like a zombie at school. He walked the hall slow and tired. Kids stared at him as he passed, and he looked away. Toby stared back, not caring about anything. Teachers didn't care what he did anyway. He'd never been a star student. In fact, he just went through the motions of school. His dad had never cared about his grades. He just wanted him to pass and graduate. So that's what Toby set out to do. He went to school and did the homework he could. Skipped the assignments he didn't make any sense. And he got passing grades. Sometimes barely passing, but credits were credits. And when Toby came in and freshman teacher started to discover that Connor was Billings' little brother, they smiled big and asked him questions. Connor was so confident and so conversational. Great at sports. He did his best at schoolwork and his extracurriculars. A real go-getter. Little brother Toby did the same. He ran in the family, right? Wrong. They found out quickly Toby wasn't very outgoing. He never really made friends and joined any clubs. He didn't care to try his best like Connor had. Toby did what he had to do to walk the line up to the senior year. Soon the teachers had stopped being friendly and started being annoyed. See, get looks of disapproval, and just as well as all, he get looks of disinterest and dismissal, like he didn't matter to him. Well, newsflash, the feeling was mutual. Toby detoured from the restroom when he ambled to his locker. There was a kid in the headphones on, messing with his hair in the mirror. He was moving up and down, and Toby used the restroom, and then when he turned around to wash his hands, the kid froze, staring into the mirror, his mouth hung open in shock. Kid pointing to Toby, more likely the shadow behind him. Dang it, must be able to see the shadow in the mirror too. Toby cracked his knuckles. Hey, look. Kid spun around and looked at Toby, frowned, and then looked back in the mirror. So, before Toby could say more, the kid booked it out of the bathroom. He was sure he was running from fire, or more like a monster in the horror movie. Okay, later, Toby muttered as he washed his hands. Toby had gym class for first period. Then he realized it was perfect to step in the plan. Today's class was scheduled to play basketball. Mr. Dillenhall, a tall, bald man with a bright tracksuit, blew the whistle. He cocked his hip and leaned his clipboard against his stomach. All right, line up for roll call. Toby, dressed in his shorts and a t-shirt, lined up with the other kids. He'd been careful to stay away from any mirrors in the locker room. He just hoped he didn't see that scared kid again. But that's all he needed, a weird rumor to start going around school. A girl walked up and handed Mr. Dillenhall a note. What now? Mr. Dillenhall muttered and he skimmed the note. Fine, go have a seat. He rolled up his eyes dramatically before getting roll call. Billings! Toby raised his hand for the Dillenhall to look up his chart. For goodness sake, let's put some effort in today, Billings. Come on, kid. Toby just crossed his arms, and Mr. Dillenhall continued taking attendance, occasionally making snide remarks to the other kids. Dillenhall is just a jerk, murmured Tabitha Bing. Kids called her Tab for short. Toby glanced at her when turned away. She was short for an outcast and liked to be a rebel against the system. She had a nose piercing and wore a lot of black. Occasionally she started petitions to get things changed around the school. She had attempted to run for student body president a couple times, but she lost to popular kids. She was always blowing little things out of proportion. In Toby's opinion, since she seemed to be a total opposite of Toby, he usually steered clear of her. You don't talk much, do you, Billings? She asked him. Toby turned to her and this time shrugged. Don't get much to say at school. She lifted her eyebrows and smiled. Unlike me, you mean. You said it, not me. All right, Dillenhall barked. Let's break into your groups and play some basketball. I want to see some serious effort in the court. None of those, oh, my chest hurts, or I twisted my ankle excuses, people. I want real athletes in the court. Let's go. And that's the end of that. Ba-da-boo. All right. So, with all that being said, today we read pages 181 to... Why are you resetting? 181 to 200, making today's episode a complete success. Next episode, we're reading pages 201 to 220. And then the next book, you can see a little sneak peek of it. Woo! A little spooky. Yes, you can see the next pages. Very cool. 201 to 220. And with that, I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. If you like, be fishing, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Where next episode is going to be the last normal. And then the next one after that will be pretty short, actually. So yeah, I hope you guys have a super fantastic, wonderful day. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.